guys? I'm BTC. The other day, Overwatch developers gave a pretty big Q&A session answering lots of questions, giving a bunch of information, including that Mei as a tank might actually happen. What are some of the other ways that they've tried to change the 2 capture point game mode in the past that just didn't end up working? Jeff Kaplan responds by saying they've tried a number of things over the year, changed the capture points to work like control points, meaning the king of the hill points. They've added defender spawn rooms closer to point A. They've added a middle capture point between point A and point B. They've moved the defender spawn back on point B. And they made it so that capture happens regardless of if defenders were on the point. Here's a question that I've seen more than a few times in regard to custom character skins, new legendary skins for crossover with other games or with movies and all that sort of stuff. And Jeff Kaplan responds by saying, I think everyone on the development team would be extremely excited to do these sorts of things, but they usually get bogged down by the business legal types. But yeah, if it was up to the dev team, they'd be all over it. So unfortunately, from his response, it sounds like probably not going to happen anytime soon. Next question, tank role is not very popular. What is Blizzard doing to try to fix this? Jeff Goodman responds by saying, actually, we've been talking about tanks as a role a lot recently. In the past, we've had trouble trying to figure out how to make tank heroes like Roadhog compete with big protective tanks like Reinhardt. Lately, we've been thinking, what if we just go in the other direction? What if Reinhardt was more like Roadhog? What would that feel like for the entire game? Basically, what if all the main tanks became off tanks? This would mean tanks would be less about pure protection and more about brawly offense. Barriers would be less prevalent, damage overall would be higher, tanks doing more damage and reducing less damage, which is kind of scary potentially. We've already been experimenting on this front, and so far it's been pretty fun, though the game does feel significantly different. Players have to play the map angles a lot more aggressively, and you can't just rely on your tank barrier for cover. I'm not sure where these experiments will go, but they're pretty interesting so far. Reworking certain characters into other roles, like for example, Mei as a tank, or putting Symmetra back into a support. What does the team think about this? And Jeff Goodman, who is the lead designer for the heroes, said that we've talked about this a lot, especially as we're working on Overwatch 2. Mei as a tank comes up quite a bit. It's something that we can maybe try. She would have to get nearly reworked though. For example, her secondary attack is far too much damage and long range to go on a tank, but it's a possibility. Other ones that come up pretty consistently in conversations are Roadhog as DPS, Symmetra as support, and Brig as a tank. Just recently, I made a video where I made the case for why Mei should be moved into the tank role. I gave a whole bunch of reasons. I also proposed some changes. I even went so far as to completely recreate this design in the workshop custom game mode and tested it pretty thoroughly. And it seemed to work quite well. Now, when I put out this video, it did a lot better than I thought it was going to do. It got over 330,000 views. But on top of that was the likes and dislikes. I was expecting not everybody to be fully on board with my idea, but you can see 20,000 to only 800. That is just amazing to me because I didn't think it was going to be that popular, but there does seem to be quite a demand for moving Mei into the tank role. I'll put a link to that video down below. You can go and check it out. So I think it's pretty neat that Blizzard is genuinely considering this. Now, I don't know if they used my video as kind of like a launching point for this, or maybe they had done it previous to that, but it's just kind of neat that they are, in fact, considering this. And I wouldn't expect it for Overwatch, but for Overwatch 2, we might actually see Mei get moved into the tank role. Next question, on the topic of golden weapons, we have Golden Bob from Ashe, but what about other stuff like Torbjorn's turret and Symmetra's teleporter? The answer was that golden weapons are an ever-evolving topic, and some of the more original characters we ran into tech challenges when trying to add gold versions. One thing to know is that we came up with the idea of golden guns after some characters were already made. For example, Torbjorn's turret was made to go Molten Core before we knew about golden guns. When we tried to apply the golden shader, it broke Molten Core. As time goes on, workflows and tech improves, we get more and more flexibility of where we can add gold to a character. My guess is that there's probably going to be some big changes to how this whole system works, because they've said time and time again that they kind of regret adding the golden weapon skins for the competitive rewards, and that it just didn't really work the way that they wanted. People felt like they had to play competitive in order to get that stuff. People who wouldn't necessarily have wanted to play the competitive mode at all. So I think that they're probably going to have some big changes with Overwatch 2. Next question. What are some commonly requested buffs, nerfs, or reworks that have been tested internally but never get put on the PTR or experimental? Jeff Goodman responds by saying, our tools are pretty robust, so it's pretty easy for us to whip up some changes and run a playtest to see how they feel. We've done quite a bit of tests on all kinds of tweaks, some big, some small, and some from the community. For example, we tried Symmetra as a support hero where the turrets healed instead of dealt damage. This was sort of fun, but kind of frustrating as sim player because Overwatch moves so fast. We started trying to tune the turrets to have super high range or being able to have a ton out of them, etc. It ended up feeling like a mismatch, but honestly, I'd be up for taking another crack at it at some point. Maybe if she had some other primary way to heal and the turrets were just a way to provide auxiliary healing, it might have gone better. It's kind of funny that he says that because I did exactly that with one of my earliest hero concepts called Dergby. I'll put a link down below if you want to check that out. Anyways, continuing on, he says, it's hard to think of other specific examples off the top of my head right now, but I know that there are more things that we've specifically tried out and ended up not doing. There are some other popular ideas, such as Mei being able to slide on her own ground ice, that we've talked about a lot but haven't actually tried in game. For the Mei example, our big concern is giving her any kind of mobility would require some serious balance reworking to make her not more terrifying than she already is. I totally love the flavor of it though. Maybe someday it'll find its way into the game in some form. My guess is they're probably going to do it in the Overwatch 2 campaign, like the PvE mode, because at that point, you don't have to worry about that sort of stuff, right? Like, you don't need to worry about trying to balance it against other players. It just needs to be a cool, fun thing to do, and they're going to be doing a lot of that stuff with Overwatch 2. And speaking of hero concepts, next question, how many unused concepts does Blizzard currently have? Goodman responds by saying, this is actually really hard to answer, actually. Most of the time, heroes go through a ton of iteration and single abilities or weapons get cut. Oftentimes, we'll end up using an older cut idea on a new concept. For example, Orissa's first ult was an idea where she could teleport away, and we'd probably kit this differently though, and then drop anywhere else on the map via a drop pod or something similar. This was back when she was extremely early and we didn't have a character yet, so I was sort of imagining a character more like Dutch from Predator, hence the minigun, etc. It ended up not really working for the gameplay and really doesn't make sense once we started developing the Orisa character. Much later, when we were working on Doomfist and we thought we could revisit the old idea, and that's how we ended up with his ultimate. I'm willing to bet that they do something similar to what I do for my own hero concepts. I have an Excel spreadsheet with just dozens and dozens of different ideas for abilities that deal damage, that heal, that have some sort of utility, ultimates, passives, all that sort of stuff. And I'm willing to bet Blizzard also has something similar to that, where they just have a huge list of different things that they want to try to use on characters. So it's not like they have all these other character designs that are currently already been created and they're just waiting to be made. It's more like they have all these different little pieces and they need to fit them together in order to find something that will work. Bless you, kitty. Next question, what about certain kinds of tech that get discovered in-game that are more of a bug than intended feature? And Jeff Goodman says, this is actually something that comes up fairly often. In general, I like to try to keep tech in the game if we can, but sometimes it's some weird bug that can cause a lot of other problems. It's super unreliable, or it's just straight up overpowered. For example, the Genji ledge dashing bug was cool, but both extremely overpowered and also really inconsistent, buggy feeling, which makes sense since it was a bug. That one we opted to just remove instead of trying to work out a way to implement it as a feature, mostly because Genji already has really strong mobility and we didn't want to add more onto that. Mercy's glide jump, though, was something that wasn't really intended, but we ended up having to fix for unrelated reasons. When we did that, we went ahead and implemented it as a real feature of the hero, so it works a lot more consistently now. She also has the big vertical super jump, which is a lot more tricky to pull off, but we haven't really adjusted or changed anything about it either, as it's pretty consistent once you get used to it, though admittedly a bit weird. What was the hardest ability to put into the game? From a tech perspective, I think the hardest might have been Echo. Her ability to duplicate an opposing hero brought a ton of challenges and bugs. In most areas of Overwatch, our ideas for what we would like to do are ever expanding in complexity, but we need to make it work with assumptions that we made years ago. Sometimes they don't mesh well. With Echo, it was a difficult clash to work out. In the end, she turned out to be a really fun hero, so it was worth the work, but there was a lot of engineering gray hairs generated around that one. Next question, what about crossplay? Jeff Kaplan responds by saying, this is something we're passionate about and exploring. I've gotten asked this question quite frequently as well, and a lot of people don't realize that up until recently, the reason why there wasn't crossplay on anything was because of Sony. They just didn't want to work with the other companies. I think it was mostly because they didn't have control over the accounts that would be in the game. So if you have a mix of Sony and Xbox and they're in the same game, and the Xbox players are doing something wrong, the Sony company can't ban those players, and they didn't want to work with that and didn't want to have that environment, so they just didn't allow it. However, recently, they have started to open this up and work and allow other games to have this crossplay, and I think that Overwatch will probably get this sooner or later. And my guess would be, even if they don't allow it for the competitive PvP, then Overwatch 2, the PvE, the campaign mode, will probably have crossplay at some point. Next question, what about account borders and other cosmetics? And Jeff Kaplan says that the border system will be going away in Overwatch 2. We want to make sure to recognize your accomplishments, but we'll be doing something different for the sequel. Are they going to add a scoreboard in-game? And Jeff Kaplan says that the tab screen was a pretty big debate during the development of the game. I think many of us feel there are other options for us to explore. A big fundamental change is more likely for Overwatch 2 than the current live game, but in general, the team is interested in giving players more or better ways to examine their own performance, again, more likely of an Overwatch 2 timeframe. Next up, what about guilds? Jeff Kaplan says, guilds is a feature that we've always been excited about. Many of us worked on the World of Warcraft and specifically worked on the guild system there, so it's something that's near and dear to us. We have some really cool ideas on how something like that could work in Overwatch. Unfortunately, from a tech and design standpoint, the feature would be an extremely heavy lift, at least to do it right, the way we'd want to do it. So not on the near horizon, but definitely on our wish list. What about the gold medal system? One of the things we're always looking at are ways to provide positive notes to players after they finish a game, even when they lose. The medal system was one of those, along with the card voting system at the end of the round. However, the medal system provides only view of the match results, when why someone earned gold, silver, or bronze can be way more complicated than just reflecting your skill. This is one of the reasons we want to look into systems that can help you understand key questions like, did I play well, and did I do something awesome, whether you win or lose. That might be an improved medal system or something else, we'll see. Little bit of info about the Paris and the Horizon reworks. Jeff Kaplan says that Aaron, who's in charge of the level design, did a lot of work on Paris, but that they're still not happy with it, and Horizon is not on the horizon. So looks like it's going to be quite a while before we see any changes to either of those two maps. What is Blizzard doing to balance the number of heroes in each of the role? Jeff Goodman says that this comes up a lot, so he'd love to get the roster to 33% each. That's certainly the goal. That said, I'm worried about going a very long time without any new damage heroes. If you look at the release history, we've been trying to push it towards an even roster without just ignoring damage heroes entirely. A little bit of bad news. What about a map editor? And they say that that's a great idea, something that we've thought about over the years. Unfortunately, it requires a decent amount of complicated technology changes, as our engine and asset pipeline is primarily set up to deliver pre-made content, but it's something that we are continuing to consider. As you've seen, I've reworked a couple of the maps for Overwatch, Horizon, and Paris, but unfortunately, I had to use the map editor for a different game, for CSGO, in order to actually make those maps. I would really like to see it, but it doesn't sound like an Overwatch map editor is going to happen anytime soon. What are some of the things that the team is working on right now? Jeff Kaplan says, the most immediate priority is a balance patch aimed at the double shield meta. This will show up on the experimental card in the next few weeks. We don't have any reworks immediately imminent for any hero, although we are discussing some, and 2 Capture Point is more of an ongoing exploration for us. We've tried many things and have yet to be satisfied with any of the results. Paris has gotten some attempts at a rework, but we weren't pleased with our results, so we paused. We haven't started looking at Horizon again yet. Those are going to be all the major questions. If you want to see more about the videos that I mentioned, the links for that stuff is down below. Also, new videos on the second channel. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to be comment of the video, then leave yours, and while you're at it, ring the bell so you never miss a new video. Also, if you want to get some cool gear, join my Discord server, or follow me on social media, then check out the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.